G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. I want to introduce you to the Upsicle, a moment of real time frozen in water. It's a pretty rare style of a phenomenon. I didn't consciously set the situation up in order to create an Upsicle. I was merely observant enough to notice that the Upsicle existed. This video is inspired by a series of videos about the beauty of water that are being uploaded by Snowwalker Prime. In particular this one, Super Slow-Mo H2O, The Art of Water. And it occurred to me that whereas Snowwalker Prime uses high technology to capture water slowed down, by the synchronicity of the way the universe works, I managed to stumble upon a moment of real-time frozen in water. So here's the story. We're talking late June 2009, so 5 years ago, when the chainsaw milled honey locust sundial was showing about 9 o'clock in the morning, and back in the days when the shade cloth fence around the buoy wall cistern was functional. In contradistinction to the way the honey locust sundial has completely succumbed to the effects of the environment, because I was testing it to destruction to see what would happen if it was given absolutely zero maintenance. And yeah, it's given me some interesting information. Meanwhile, the erosion control shade cloth fence around the buoy wall cistern, it's completely succumbed to the ultraviolet radiation, and the blue glass drinking bowl, I think it was a fruit bowl somebody gave me, which I used as a water dish for the kangaroos, it's long since succumbed to the delicate touch of a whippersnipper's string and shattered, so I've replaced it with a stainless steel dish. But to return to the story of the Upsicle, there I was, 9 o'clock in the morning. It had been a pretty cold night. My project at the time had been to build the SunFoil Mark II in time to give it to my son for his 20th birthday. And I habitually use the deck of my hut as a workbench. So while I was laying out the tools, before getting to work, I did happen to notice that there was something a little bit weird about the kangaroo's drinking bowl. Hard to see in this particular shot. So I walked over, and sure enough, it was really weird. The water in the dish was frozen solid, and there was a projection of ice poking up out of the dish. A stalagmite, early in the morning, frozen, poking up out of the dish. Took me a while to figure out what had caused it. And it's one of those kind of synchronicitous, maybe not 1 in a million chances, but it's pretty rare and unusual. So here's the explanation. It's got to do with temperature inversions. I'm sure you've all heard of temperature inversions. They cause problems with pollutions in towns and cities all over the world. Now, an inversion implies that something's upside down. Yes? Okay, now, right side up, and under normal conditions, the air temperature is warmer at the surface than it is higher up in the sky. And anybody who's ever suffered a hot day at sea level and either climbed a mountain or jumped in their car and driven to the top of a hill should be entirely familiar with the phenomenon. That's why there's snow caps on the tops of mountains. That's why trees stop growing as they get close to the snow line. It gets colder as you go up. However, in a temperature inversion, things are a bit different. What happens in a temperature inversion is that you wind up with high ground to the west of a valley, or low ground. Sun goes behind the mountains in the afternoon, so the valley is not actually getting solar radiation direct. So it starts radiating heat that's been absorbed during the day out into space via the shadow, or through the shadow of the mountains on the sunset side. So it starts to cool down fairly early. Okay, so you get this inversion situation where you've got cold air at ground level and a warmer layer above the cold air, so that somebody smoking chimney, for example, puts smoke into the cold air, it rises, it hits the temperature inversion, or the thermocline, which is a difference in temperature, it's a fairly well-defined layer, and the smoke cannot rise into the warm air above it, so it fills up the valley with smog. And here I am, perched on the northwest ridge of Henkler Hill. So here I am, up on top of the ridge, and I'm considerably elevated over the valley. And in the afternoon, in winter, the sun goes down behind the hills to the west and the northwest, and it puts that entire area down there into shadow, and it starts radiating heat into space, and it's been cleared, so it's got very little trees and vegetation and therefore very little thermal mass, and it cools down pretty good, pretty quick. The greatest temperature difference I've ever seen in early morning temperatures between down there and up here, it was +6 at my place, it was -12 down there, that's Celsius, with 0 being freezing point. Okay, so what happens is cold air accumulates in the valley, and as it accumulates, it rises up the side of the hill, and as it rises up the side of the hill, it pushes a tongue of cold air which comes up my driveway. And the cold air is being pushed up the hill by the weight of further accumulating cold air down there in the valley. And on that particular night, the temperature in town was in fact about -10 or 11 degrees. The town is at the same elevation as the valley down there, so we'll say that the air was -10 degrees Celsius as it was being pushed up the driveway here. It's fairly usual on such mornings for the frost line to be somewhere around here where I'm standing at the moment. On that morning, because it was quite so cold, the cold air tongue pushing up my driveway came all the way up here into the clearing, and it completely surrounded the blue glass dish of water. While surrounding the blue glass dish of water, it supercooled it. Now bear in mind that it was rainwater coming out of a 5,000 litre tank in the enclosure there. So there was 5 tonnes of water with a fair amount of thermal mass on the north side of the dish. And I'm guessing that as the frost line was up about here, then the thermocline was probably about this high up the tree. So what's going on is the air up here on the Melaleuca alternifolia was slightly above freezing point. Right? Might have been 2 or 3 degrees. So condensation was appearing on the leaves. And one drop from up there has fallen, and it's come down and it's hit the thermocline. And as it's hit the thermocline, it's moved into air that was -10 or -11 degrees Celsius, and it's run into a dish of water that was pure, still, supercooled, and just looking for an excuse to nucleate and crystallise. So, returning to the period photo, the droplet of water falls down 10 feet maybe. So it arrives with a reasonable amount of energy. The bottom of the dish was a flat-bottomed parabola which focused the otherwise normal droplet spike and crown formation that you would expect from a drop falling into water of a uniform thickness in a flat-bottomed container, it focused the crown of droplets back inwards onto the spike. As soon as the energy from the water droplet hit the bowl and the spike began to rise, it snap froze. Supercooled water in air at around minus 10 degrees Celsius, and all of a sudden the liquid turns into a solid, thus freezing the stalagmite. And my guess is the reason that the stalagmite or the Upsicle is leaning to the north is probably due to the 5 tonnes of water in the buoy wall cistern with its considerable thermal mass and the resultant infrared radiation. So it was hotter on the north side of the Upsicle, and therefore the north side took longer to freeze, and so it was soggy while the south side was freezing and expanding as water does, and therefore we have an asymmetric Upsicle. But fairly difficult to replicate. I mean, sure, you could go and get yourself a fridge and a dish of water and you could spend probably half a day with cameras and tripods and flashes, and you might even want some thermally heated underwear. But you would be able to replicate this. But I really enjoyed the phenomena so much that not only did I interrupt my construction sequence photographs to record it, I decided it would be a clever idea to have a little bit of a trip in time so that I could show it to subscribers who've come to my channel since then, because I first posted a movie briefly mentioning this a very long time ago. So, as they say, it pays to look closely, and I'm assuming this will qualify as a mad scientist video. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.